Thanks for listening to In the Game with Elliot. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on the latest episodes. All right, people, I'm Elliot Georgiadis, and this is episode 3 of In the Game with Elliot, and this week we are talking to Ashley Adamson. Ashley is the lead host and reporter for the Pac-12 Network and has had a fascinating career covering coaches and athletes all across the country. Not to mention, she is just one of the kindest people you would ever meet. So welcome to Ashley Adamson, face of the Pac-12. I was so thrilled when I had emailed you and you responded to me and were like, yes, let's do it. Let's set this up. I think it was probably about 3 seconds after I read that email that I was frantically texting my mom like, Mom, Ashley Adamson responded to me and she said that she'd do the podcast.
I'm so afraid you're going to be sorely disappointed.
No, are you kidding me? Like, even seeing your face pop up on my screen, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so exciting.
I'm excited that you invited me.
Oh, well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this, because I know that you've had a really hectic schedule, especially with all the transitions that you've had to deal with in the last year. So I really appreciate it. And it was actually, though, through a virtual event because of COVID that I heard you speak at the panel for women in sports and events. And I was just so impressed by how articulate you are in sharing your experience and the things that you've learned along the way in your career, because I'm really cool, I even messaged you on LinkedIn afterwards and said, just consider me the newest member of your fan club, Ashley. So that's just my level of coolness, but no, I'm really excited.
It, by the way, and I appreciated it.
So good. I'm glad. Well, I've been really, like I said, excited to get to talk to you because you've just had so many incredible experiences over the course of your career, but I actually really love the story of how you got started in sports. So can you kind of go back undergrad, graduating, how you ended up deciding to pursue this career path that you're on right now?
Yeah. So I would say the thing that I love about that question, and I love asking other broadcasters that question as well, is that you ask 200 different people how they got into this industry and you'll get 200 very different answers, right? Mm-hmm. Like everybody kind of has a different path and different entry point. For me, I went to Boston College for undergrad, kind of knew that this was something that I really wanted to do, but didn't have a good enough reel or, just there was no way I was going to get hired for an on-air job coming out of college. So I ended up moving back to Denver. I was, coaching at my high school. I was working in the admissions department and I applied to grad school, ended up at grad school at Boston University. And from there, my very first job, and people are always like, well, why did you take a job in Albany, New York, working overnights in the, at a local cable news station? And the answer is that it was the only job that I got of the many that I applied to. So I end up in Albany, New York. I'm working at a Time Warner station. I was doing a few, they were throwing me a few bones here and there because they knew what I wanted to do, which was obviously on-air stuff. So I'd do sidelines every now and then for some high school football games. And, I did a few sidelines for basketball games. But really what my main job was I was a PA and I worked on the assignment desk. So I'm like rewriting AP wire copy for producers and, making rounds calls of the local police stations at, 3:00 in the morning. And
which is a grind. That's a tough feat.
It was a tough year. And I give like everyone who has worked in local news, I feel like, when you connect with someone who works or has worked in local news, it's like they're automatically a kindred spirit because you just kind of have this shared experience of what that is. Mm-hmm. And this is no offense to all the amazing people who went straight to ESPN and, regional networks and all the rest. But I think I learned a lot about kind of the news beat and the news grind. And then B, just that there is a process and a path. And I was really frustrated when I was in Albany and kind of, there was one point that I thought I was going to sort of walk away from the business and or go, be a producer. I had some producing opportunities back in Boston. But I had told myself I was going to give myself 2 years to just do everything I could in these 2 years to get an opportunity to be full-time on the air. And if at the end of 2 years, I would reevaluate. So fast forward, I decide that, at one point that there's a lot more news jobs out there than sports jobs. So I started putting together a newsreel and I would go out, on my off days and shoot all these fake news stand-ups and packages that never saw the light of day. And I made a newsreel and I applied to a news job in Syracuse, New York. And I got the interview and I was so excited and I show up And I'd kind of heard rumblings before I got there that the station was in sort of disrepair and that things were not going well. And that was probably one of the reasons that they called me and said, hey, we could probably pay this girl nothing and she'll come be a VJ for us, which was true. And so I went in and did the interview, and like, it was like a morgue when I walked in. I mean, people are looking at me. There was probably 3 people in the newsroom, and there was one guy, I'll never forget it. He just looked up from his desk and gave me one of these, like, don't do it.
Are you serious?
But I was just I just wanted a chance to prove that I could go do this. Like, to be able to be on the air, you have to be on the air and get reps. It's like anything else is practice. So I had my interview. I was all excited. They offered me a position kind of on the spot and said, we'll be in touch with a formal offer. So I'm leaving and getting ready to drive back to Albany, and I'm just on cloud 9. Like, I think that I just have found my thing, and I'm going to go be a news VJ at Channel 5 in Syracuse. And this is so great. Well, a girlfriend of mine who I'd gone to BU grad school with, who was also working in Syracuse, I had called her and told her I was going to be there. And she called me up on right as I was leaving, asking me how it went. And she said, hey, I just ran into another reporter who's at Channel 9, which is the best station in the market. And they actually have an opening. If you're here, you should just drop a copy of your, reel off. It was a DVD at that point. Yeah. So it's clearly aging myself. So I go and I'm like, this was before you had like automatic GPS in your phone. This was when I still had like a flip phone. So I'm trying to find and punch into my old school GPS, this address, and I can't find the station. And I'm kind of like, why am I spending my time and spinning my wheels trying to find this random station that probably isn't going to have anything to do with me when I have a job offer and I'm really excited about it. I'm just going to get back on the road. So I'm driving and I see out of the corner of my eye off the side of the highway, like News Channel 9, like this giant sign. And so I remember it so well, Elliot, which is so weird because it's one of those like moments that is so small and insignificant, but I sort of knew in my head somehow at the moment that I was like, hey, just get off and go find it. Like, there's a sign, whatever, just, you'll never know how this is going to pan out. You're here, just do it. Like, something inside me said, like, just go. So I pull off, I find it, drive around for a little bit, find it. And I grab a DVD out of my trunk and bring it in to the receptionist. And I introduced myself and said, I'm in the area. I work in Albany. I just want to drop this off. I heard you guys had a news opening. She said, great, I'll give it to our news director. Figured I would never going to hear from them again. About 2 hours later, I'm just getting back to my apartment in Albany and I get a call and I pick up and it says, hi, this is Stephen Fonte, the sports director at News Channel 9. May I speak with Ashley? And I like almost drove off the road. I was so confused because I was like, why is a sports director calling me? So, and I'm telling the longer version of the story, but the point being, he was a sports director at the time, has been still to this day is my biggest mentor. He said, hey, my news director just handed me your reel. And I think there was some confusion because they thought you were applying for a news job, but everything on your reel is sports. And you're kind of exactly what we're looking for. We're hiring a number 3 in our sports department right now. Are you interested? And again, I was just so blown away because I'm like, wait, how did I give you a sports reel? Well, what had happened is my dad, who's living in Denver, never get to see any of my stuff that I did. So I put everything on a DVD that I was supposed to mail him. And because I'm a terrible daughter, just like never actually mailed it to him. So I gave the receptionist and, the news director the wrong DVD. I was supposed to give him a news DVD and accidentally gave him an old sports one that just had a bunch of sports stuff on it. And so I ended up going back for an interview the next week and got that job. And then 3 months into that job, the weekend sports anchor who had been there for 10 years decided to get out of the business. So I started doing fill-in anchoring and I was terrible. Like, I was not ready for the job at all, but they didn't have anybody else that could do it. And they decided they weren't going to hire another third person full time. So I became the weekend sports anchor, all because I randomly decided at the last minute to get off the highway because I saw a sign, because my girlfriend called me and told me about an opening, and because I gave them the wrong DVD that I was supposed to send my dad. So whenever I tell that story, the biggest thing to me is just for people to know that there is no formula that's going to get you to exactly where you want to go. You have no idea what the formula is. And that was so frustrating for me because I just wanted to be told, okay, go do this, go do that, and you will get an opportunity. It doesn't work that way. You just kind of have to keep your head down and take some chances and be ready for when a sports director calls you to say yes, and I'll be back as soon as I can. So that was kind of that was how I launched into my very first on-air job in Syracuse, New York. So I'll never be able to thank Stephen Fonte enough for taking a look at that DVD and giving me a call.
Wow. There's so many things that I love about that story. First of all, when I was teaching, I was with juniors and seniors, so 17 and 18-year-olds, and they put so much pressure on themselves to have it all figured out, right? Have the major, know what job they're going to get lined up after college, and trying to impress upon them that you have no idea. Nothing is going to be a straight path. So I think it's really incredible that you've had such a successful career and that you're able to kind of share that with others and say, listen, wasn't what I expected, wasn't how I thought I was going to get into this, but this is what's ended up happening. And the fact that you saw a sign on the highway, a lot of times when I think of those kind of things, I think of them as like a little God wink, that it was just that little
Absolutely.
sign. Yeah. That
Absolutely.
you
Yeah.
needed.
And the fact that I remember it, it's just weird that it was just such a specific memory I have of couldn't find it, was about to give up on it. And then just, I had to like cut across 3 lanes of traffic to get off the next exit. But it was, you're exactly right. A God wink is the perfect way to qualify that.
I co-opted that word from somebody else, but
I love it.
I think it's very appropriate sometimes when you're talking about this kind of stuff. So again, I just love your story of how you kind of transitioned into this. Because even in undergrad, didn't you apply for another program right after you graduated and you didn't get it? And that's why you were like, okay, reset.
Yes.
Let's really go for what I want.
So yeah, I was applying to be in the Page program at NBC in New York. And my brother was living in New York at the time, who I'm really close with. And my plan was always to go live with him in New York and do the NBC Page program and kind of launch my career that way, which looking back, I'm sure it would have led to something else, but it certainly wouldn't have led to what I'm doing right now, which is basically my dream job. So I'm thankful that that door was closed, but I had 3 interviews. I knew a couple people there. I felt really good about it. I thought everything had gone well. And then it was just like crickets. And all of a sudden I graduate from BC. And for the first time truly in my life, I just felt so lost. I was, working at the Ground Round, which is basically like an Applebee's, and trying to figure out where my next rent payment was going to come from. I mean, that year after I graduated from college was the hardest year of my life in terms of just feeling lost. So that's another thing I tell young people all the time too, is you will, you talk to people. And I remember talking to young women in the business and even, older women that had made it, quote unquote, whatever that means, were doing what I hoped to be doing, I guess. And I just remember thinking like, you never went through this, did you? Like, you guys have it all figured out. And the reality is like, no, everybody goes through this. There's a ton of self-doubt. There's a ton of moments. You have a lot of dark points of your career. I mean, to pretend that like everything has been roses and easy. No, you give up a lot of your personal life. You give up a lot of relationships. You make sacrifices for what, your career ambitions. And everyone gets to choose, right? Like what is a personal sacrifice worth for your professional life? And I will say, I get asked all the time, would you go back and do it again? And the honest answer is, I'd love to say yes. And I am so grateful to my younger self for doing all of those things. But like, I'm glad I didn't know, how hard it was going to be, because I've been insanely lucky and I've gotten some great opportunities, but there were some really tough times in the first 6, 7, 8 years of my career, for sure.
Well, again, I just think it's so wonderful that you've had these experiences and that you're so open about them and willing to share them with other people, because even, somebody doesn't have to have wanted to go into sports to take away something from your experiences. But back to when you had landed that first sports reporting job, and then you got to anchor on the weekends and you were in Syracuse, and that had to feel a little daunting at times, but also incredibly exciting. Did you have any moment there early on where you were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm really getting to do this?
Oh, I was pinching myself all the time. And I mean, the reality is it all happened pretty quickly. And then I had to tell my current station in Albany, which they had kept saying, you're not ready to do on-air stuff. You're not ready to do on-air stuff. So it felt very good to tell my news director that I had gotten an on-air job in Syracuse, certainly. But you feel, and I've talked to a lot of women, and I'm sure men feel this way too, but I think it happens more generally with women, or that's at least who I've talked about this shared experience. I had a total crisis of confidence. Like I felt like I was playing someone on TV. I felt like I was just not ready for the job, and I wasn't. And you never are. Like you should never take a job that you're fully ready for, because then it's not enough of a reach for you. I mean, you should take a new job. If you're going to move, it's an opportunity to grow. And so I was green as green could be. And I just, it's like every time you make a mistake, you just learn from that and remember, okay, next time that happens, I'm going to have if next time the prompter goes down, I'm going to make sure I have my script sorted so that if I need to reference them, it's okay. Next time I forget a name, I'm going to have a way to get around that. The next time that coach gives me a 1-word answer, I'm going to make sure that I have a response ready to go, or give it a beat and hold the mic up there a little bit longer and make him say something else. Like there's all these little tiny things that you have to go through in order to gain that experience and confidence. And it's just rep on rep on rep on rep. And you've experienced so many different situations that then when inevitably they pop up again, which in live TV, things go off the rails all the time. That's why it's so fun. That you just sort of know, you reach into you're like, okay, I've been through this. Like, let's go here, or I'm not going to make that mistake again, or I'm going to make sure that we stay on track here, or it's okay to go off track here. So I think that's yes, I was shocked that I actually finally had a full-time job in sports on air. And it was also really overwhelming because I was trying to learn, I'd never been to Syracuse, New York before I got there. And now all of a sudden I'm covering all these high school teams. I'm covering, obviously the Syracuse Oranges, everyone lives and breathes that university up there. And so I'm trying to learn everything about Syracuse. I'm trying to learn everything about, Lemoyne and all these different colleges. We covered Cornell and Ithaca. And so it's a lot, and it was kind of overwhelming. And you're moving to a new city that you don't know anybody. I mean, that's the other thing I think that I tell young people all the time, but once you've done it once, and because I had moved to Albany, I knew a couple people there, but because I had moved to Albany and kind of done it, I realized it takes about 9 months to really feel like you understand A, your job, and B, the city. Like, I know where I'm going to go if I want this. I've got somebody I can call if I want to go to brunch on Sunday. I've got somebody I can call if I want to go see a movie on a Tuesday night. I know where my dry cleaning is. Like those types of things that seem so small and silly, it really does take that amount of time to make you feel like you're comfortable in a place. So that was the best part about moving around. And my next job was in Indianapolis, and it was the same thing. It's like, once you've done it, you just have the confidence that you can do it, and you've learned from those experiences, and you figure out the SIDs that you need to call and the relationships that you need to build. And it kind of all just builds on itself.
So lots of transitioning, lots of figuring
lots
things
of mistakes.
out as we go.
Yeah. Yep, exactly.
You talk about your mentor from there a lot, it seems like, Steve, right? So when you were working there, what was it about him that made such an impression on you that you still think of him so highly and credit him with so much of that success?
It's a good question. And I've kind of thought about this a lot, because he is the person that I reference every time. I've had a lot of incredible mentors that have helped me along the way, and people who have kind of pulled me up and lifted me up and given me great advice and feedback throughout my career. But Steve is someone who I always think about, because he was the first one to take a chance on me. So part of it was, I think, the timing, right? Like, he gave me my first true opportunity. He was the very first person who said, I believe that you can do this job, and I am going to put my eggs in your basket. So let's go do this, and I'm going to help you get there. So I think part of that was his belief in me. It's easy for people to say, oh, your reel is good, or yeah, you've got talent, or, oh, this looks good. But it's another thing for them to say, I want you to come be part of my team, and I'm going to hire you. So that was part of it. And then the other side of it is just, and I try to remind myself of this all the time now when I'm working with RPAs and younger people and younger broadcasters, is that he showed up. Like, I always believe, the old cliche is 90% of life is showing up. I think that is true in sports, and it is true in leadership. He was just there. And I always felt like I could ask him any dumb question and he was never going to judge me. I always felt like if I needed help on something, he would help me. And the best story that I can give is kind of anecdotally an example of this. Doug Marrone was hired as the football coach at Syracuse, and the announcement came down, which obviously was a huge, huge story. It came down at 9:30 on a Sunday night. And we were on the air at 10. I think I hit at the 10 o'clock newscast at 10:15. So I had 45 minutes. I have no idea who Doug Marrone is. I have no idea where I'm going to get video. I mean, I hadn't been on the job that long, and he had been working literally 3 months straight up until I got there because of a variety of different things. He came in on one of his very first off days, and he didn't even call me. He just, all of a sudden, Sunday night at 9:30, he's got 2 small kids. He shows up and he sits down at the edit bay. And I'm like, oh, he must be anchoring the newscast. He must be here because this is such a big deal. He's anchoring. He sits down at the edit bay and just starts editing, finding, like, pulling from the system Doug Marone video. And he's requesting it from all these different sources. I don't even remember what we used to use. And then he sits down and he's like, okay, let me write your scripts. He helped me come up with, like, what I was going to say for Doug Marone. And then, hey, don't forget about how it impacts this and how he's connected to this person. And I just remember sitting at my desk and I'd felt so overwhelmed and panicked. And he just knew. He didn't even need to call and say, do you want me to come in and help you? He just drove in at Sunday night at 9:30, edited, and, like, I mean, he saved my hiney. And it was that moment that I was like, man, you are just one of the salt of the earth people. And B, it was all about the team. Like, to him, it was always about the team and making sure that, I was on his team. I was a part of his team and he was going to take care of me. And he pushed me on stuff too. It wasn't like it was this, he would say, hey, think about this, think about that. You always want to try and do this. He was a teacher. And I just felt like, because it was that time in my career, I was just able to soak up so much from him. So yeah. I've got a big spot in my heart for Stephen Fonte. That's for sure.
That's just so great. Not only you had this opportunity and somebody believed in you, but that you had that support system as you were really
rare,
getting your footing. Yeah.
Yeah. It's sad to say, but it's not. And I've had a lot of different jobs and I've worked with a lot of different great people, and I've had, I don't want anyone who's listening to this that I've worked with think that I've had so many great people that I've worked with, but just, it is exceedingly rare in this business to find somebody like that.
And it was a pivotal point in your career too, which is why it also made such a big impression on you. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So after Syracuse, fast forward a few years, you go to Indianapolis. After Indianapolis, you get pulled in, obviously, with where you're at right now, to PAC-12 Network. What happened during that time when you were making that transition? Because that's pretty big. There's so much I want to ask you about being a part of something on the ground floor like that and being a part of the launch of this network. But, like, how did you even land that position? What's the story there with when you transitioned from news to the sports network?
I mean, it's another perfect example of, like, I was not supposed to get this job, and it was timing and luck and just the stars sort of aligning. I was coming up at I think I had about maybe 6 months left on my contract in Indianapolis. Mm-hmm. And I had interviewed for a job in Washington, D.C. And felt really good. I mean, they offered me the job. They ended up offering me the job, but I had found out, and my brother lived in San Francisco. My brother, who I referenced earlier, who's in New York, he and his wife and their first child had just moved out here to San Francisco in 2010. So I'd come out and visited and just fallen in love with it, and, called all the news directors in San Francisco and just thought, man, this is the dream. Like, I'm going to figure out a way to get out here. This is where I want to be. I want to be near my brother. I want to, what an unbelievable place this is. Mm-hmm. And so my dad sent me an article. I remember when the networks announced that they were launching and that they were going to be based in San Francisco. And I just thought, you've got to be kidding me. Like, what? It felt so random, right? Like, I knew the conference offices were in Walnut Creek, but I assumed they would be in LA or, and that's another story, because there's been plenty of criticism about the networks being in San Francisco. But for me personally, it was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So and again, there's, like, so many backstories that I don't want to bog down the answer to your question, but there were just so many things that happened. I ended up coming out to San Francisco sort of last minute. And my agent at the time had reached out. He had known Kristen Bredis, who was hiring, the talent manager for the Pac-12. And he basically begged her to meet with me. She kind of was like, hey, look, I don't even know. We're not hiring anyone full-time. I'm definitely not flying. I'm not moving anybody out here. We know we're going to have one full-time host, but she's not experienced enough to be the full-time host. She hasn't even really done that yet. And he was like, just trust me, please meet with her and, just do me a solid. Mm-hmm. So I meet with her and we just totally connected. We have a couple mutual friends, Brooke Olzendam, who I used to work with in Indianapolis. She was the Pacers. She's now with the Portland Trailblazers, their sideline reporter. And so we had some mutual connections and we just started chatting and we just totally hit it off. And then after we had talked for like an hour, she's like, I guess I need to tell you about the networks and the vision. And here's how this is all breaking down and what we're planning on doing. And then we left. And I remember I got to the elevator and we gave each other a hug, which was kind of weird, but I was like, okay, great. I mean, that felt like it went well. I have no idea. So I left and, followed up with her a little bit, but just kind of thought, I'm glad I made that connection. There's not really a job for me there. But then when I got the offer in Washington, D.C., and I was all set to go out and find an apartment and had just, basically said, okay, like, let's negotiate this offer. And my agent emailed Kristen and said, I just want you to know, Ashley's going to take this job with DC. Like, thanks for meeting with her. I really appreciate it. Just a heads up. And it was a brilliant play by him, because I wouldn't have thought to do that if, I was operating on my own. And so I think she kind of thought, well, wait, but I thought we had a thing, and I've been trying to, and what I didn't know from behind the scenes was that she was trying to convince the powers that be that we needed 2 full-time talent, and that one could be more of a reporter kind of fill-in host, which was essentially the role that I ended up getting hired for. So she came back and offered me and said, hey, let me work on this. Give me like 24 hours. And she convinced Gary Stevenson, the head of the network at the time, he said, if you like her, go make her an offer, like, go get her. And so that is truly the moment when you asked me if I have like pinched myself. I mean, when Josh Santry, who's my agent, called me and said, Kristen wants to make you an offer. They are making you an offer. Like, we need to talk, call me. It was like one of the most emotional I've been about anything professionally. I thought he was messing with me. It was like too good to be true, because again, going back to what I said earlier, I wasn't ready for this job. I was green. If I had gone through the typical, if I had come out and auditioned and done all these different things, I don't know that they would have hired me. I mean, maybe, but I hadn't had a ton of, live hosting experience. I'd anchored plenty of newscasts or sportscasts. I'd done, a few half-hour shows. I knew how to shoot, I knew how to edit, but I didn't know how to be a full-time studio host by any stretch. So that was kind of how I got the job. It was luck and timing. And I think Kristen, to her credit, saw something in me. And after we connected, and she told me later, she's like, one of the reasons that we hired you is because I knew everything was going to be kind of a disaster when we launched. It was a startup, and she goes, I knew we were going to leave you hanging out to dry a few times. And I needed somebody who didn't know any better. She's like, I got thousands of reels and like hundreds from some pretty big time names. She was like, but they all wanted their own show and they wanted this and that. And she's like, and you were this perfect, local news girl who was going to come in, hopefully have a great attitude, work your tail off, and not know any better when everything was going wrong. You came from local news, so you were kind of used to that. And she was dead right. I mean, there was a lot, especially that first year, that was a little touch and go. And I'm glad that not that many people had the network, certainly in those first couple of months. We'll say that. But yeah, it was luck and a great connection with someone and timing and just, I've been here now. I will have moved here 9 years ago in July. And it's just been the biggest gift of my life, for sure.
Wow, that's just, again, another really cool story about how things kind of fell into place when you weren't really expecting it, which I think is so cool. Although you've totally piqued my interest, though. You said there was a lot of criticism because your offices were set up in San Francisco Bay and not LA. So like, what? Explain that to somebody that might not be aware of what
So
that
I'd
is.
say when we first launched, there was so much excitement. Like, the schools were excited that, we were doing something that had never been done before. There had never been a conference network that was wholly owned by the universities, right? So Larry Scott, the commissioner, who will finish up his tenure here in a couple of weeks, he had this vision of, they added Colorado and Utah to the league. And then he said, I want to launch the Pac-12 network. And not just one network, but 7 networks. We're going to have 6 regionals and 1 national. And he wanted it to be in the heart of, or as close to as possible, Silicon Valley. Obviously we've got 2 schools in Cal and Stanford up here, so it made sense that it was part of our footprint, but he wanted it to be near the conference offices, which was in Walnut Creek. And they looked at Oakland. There were a few different places, and then ultimately settled on a place right in downtown San Francisco for the studios. And when we launched, and this is the thing that I always try and tell, there's plenty of people who have, shared a lot of criticism about Larry Scott's decisions and about the network as a whole being a failure. The thing that I always want people to remember, when we launched, the goal was to shine a light on the Olympic sports that didn't get nearly enough attention, women's basketball, all these other, the Conference of Champions moniker is accurate because all of our Olympic sports are just absolutely unbelievable. And they win national titles just at an unbelievable rate. I think we had 12 or 13 this year already. Wow. And so that was kind of the goal. And it was always going to be that we were going to give some money back to the schools, but Larry Scott signed this landmark blockbuster media rights deal with Fox and ESPN that quadrupled what any other league was given to their schools at that time in 2011. Now, the problem is the deal was, and he said this, like retrospectively, probably would have shortened the deal, gotten less money up front, but been able to have more flexibility on the back end. What has since happened is, the landscape has changed, distribution has changed. We're never able to get on DirecTV, so a lot of people couldn't see the Pac-12 network. And it never felt like it fully reached what the potential of what we hoped it would, but the goalposts moved. Like we are fulfilling what we wanted to do when we set out, but the goalposts have moved because the SEC network launched, the ACC network launched, the Big Ten redid its deal. Mm-hmm. And now instead of being out front, we're lagging behind and not giving our schools as much money as those other conferences. So that is like the sort of just the hard truth of where we're at. We have a new commissioner coming in, George Kliavkoff, who has an unbelievable background in media entertainment. He's coming from MGM Entertainment. He's got a lot of great experience. And I think people are really excited about sort of his vision for what could be next. But our media rights deal is up after 2023-2024 academic year. And it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. There's a lot of different ways it could go. But the criticism, to go back to your initial question, the criticism about being in San Francisco really didn't come on until probably within the last 5-6 years. And a lot of that was just looking at how expensive it is to operate a studio in San Francisco. It's really expensive. You could have the same space in Phoenix or, Las Vegas or somewhere else for a lot cheaper. So I imagine, this is just my guess. I don't know anything, but I imagine that at some point, George said that they're committed to being here in the interim and seeing what makes the most sense. But I think at some point the network and the conference offices will move to a place that is just more affordable.
It's interesting to hear your perspective, especially since, again, you've been able to see this long-term from beginning to where it's at right now. And again, too, you're facing a lot of different things than networks that are covering, the professional leagues. You're working with schools, like you said, and you're covering student athletes, and that's a whole different world. So it's interesting, again, to kind of hear your perspective on how that process has gone. And then speaking of some of those challenges you face, I can't even imagine the challenges from this last year and dealing with all the hurdles that I'm sure that you guys were facing. So tell me a little bit about what it was like when sports stopped and then sports started again, but it didn't look the same.
Yeah, it was brutal, honestly, Elliot. Like it was just, it's hard sometimes because you forget, like it's easy to forget how uncertain everything was. And there's still a ton of uncertainty, right? Like we're not fully out of this thing yet. We're not back to normal. It feels like we're getting glimpses of that, and thankful for, vaccines and all of the science that has gotten us to where we are today compared to where we were exactly a year ago. Is sometimes it's important to step back and think about that. I tell myself that all the time because we are in such a different place. We weren't even leaving our house for in San Francisco. It was like a full lockdown for a few weeks. So I think the hardest part, honestly, was professionally speaking. I've got 2 small kids. So trying to navigate working from home, in my bedroom, locking the door and muting my mic after every answer so that you can't hear them screaming downstairs. And the true hard part about it was, and again, I say all of this knowing that the pandemic affected people way. I am one of the very lucky ones. I was able to keep my job. We were very lucky. We had family close by to help us. Like we came through this thing. I have absolutely nothing to complain about. But what was hard was the uncertainty and then all the decisions that came from the network. We laid off a lot of people. We furloughed a lot of people. I was, partially furloughed for the summer, and we are still trying to work back from losing all of those people. And also kind of, I'm just gonna be totally frank, like the wounds of what that was. Mm-hmm. And people understood like, hey, the situation we're in, we're not producing sports, we're not producing content. Like we had a daily podcast and we did some 15-minute shows that were, Zoom shows essentially that we were putting on Pac-12 Network, but there was no reason for them to be paying all of us full time. It made sense that everybody made the decisions that they made. And yet that didn't make it any easier for the families who had kids, who were single income families, all the rest. So we basically wiped out, a lot of dear, dear friends who I worked with. Studio production team was mostly let go. The digital team was let go. And it just felt weird. Like it was just so hard. And all of a sudden, all of these things that people have been responsible for, it just, you didn't even know who to go to for certain stuff. Like, who's the person that I call now for this? Or how do I, like, who's problem solving that? Or who's thinking about connecting those dots? And we've got a really small team now. And I will say there's been some benefit. Like the silver lining is that I've been able to, get more involved on the content creative side. And I've been doing more behind the scenes stuff, producing some of our long form storytelling. And I've loved that. And I think that has really scratched an itch that I've had for a long time, and opened my eyes to a world sort of beyond the on camera hosting. So that's been, again, a super unbelievable gift that I wasn't expecting to come out from this. But the hard part is that I still have a lot of dear friends who haven't found, and they will, because they're super talented and they, they're going to get an opportunity. And this, as the sports world is now finally kind of back and people are hiring, there's going to be opportunities for them. But I've got great talented friends who haven't found their next thing. And that's, that's hard. It's really hard. And you have a little bit of survivor's guilt, if I'm going to be honest. And you have a little bit of like, how did we go? How was a year ago life was, or a year and a half ago, life was so different. And then it just like all sort of changed. And there's going to be new changes coming, again, like I said, with the new commissioner, I think I'm really curious to see what his vision is and the decisions they make. But I am at peace with knowing that even if my Pac-12 network tenure ended tomorrow, I genuinely can say this was like the biggest professional gift of my life. It allowed me to be in San Francisco. I married my husband who was living in LA, who that would have never happened if I was in DC. I live next door to my brother. Like there just so many beautiful things came together that I will never look back on this experience with anything other than just complete love and gratitude. Because it's just been a total blessing. So I am at peace with that, and knowing that hopefully we can get it to be in an even better place ahead of whatever happens in 2023, 2024.
Mm-hmm. Well, I really respect that care you have for all the people that you were working with at the studio, and the compassion you have for everyone whose path with their jobs this last year was different. It's wonderful though to hear about the positives that Pac-12 has brought to your life. I have to say, it's like a total dream of mine is to have like a Georgiades family compound. So the fact that you live next to your brother, I think
we call it the
great.
commune, by the way, because we do.
We've
got like, yeah.
I love that.
We've recruited everybody out here now. My mom is out here. My in-laws just moved up to Marin a little while ago. My sister-in-law's out here. So yeah, we've got like the full.
That's totally the dream.
Yeah, it's awesome.
That's so wonderful.
Okay, don't wait. Do everything you can to make it happen.
I mean, we're spending a lot of time together this year already, anyways. But the goal is once we have the dream jobs that we're able to do that all from within the same area. So I love hearing about that. So on a little bit of a lighter note, you've had this really great career. I can't even imagine all the different athletes, coaches, sports professionals that you've talked to, and games and tournaments that you have covered. I'm sure there's like so many that you could think of that were special or made some kind of impression on you. But like I said earlier, covering collegiate athletes, I think is probably really different than when you're talking about professional sports. It's a different environment. So has there been some moment from, the last almost decade that really stuck with you, or one that kind of resonated with you and has made this experience special?
Oh, that is such a good and hard question. And I think there were those moments that I had kind of the pinch me moments. Like I remember the first time I interviewed Larry Bird when I was in Indiana, and just like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm interviewing Larry Bird. I spent a lot of time at the Indianapolis 500 and got to meet and ride around with Mario Andretti, which was like a total dream. I mean, there's been moments that you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this. Mm-hmm. But I would say that the thing that is truly the most, as I look back, like the most gratifying has been a lot of the student athletes that I've gotten to connect with. Like it has really impacted how I feel about sort of, and I'm not trying to sound cheesy, but I mean it, like the future of where we're headed. The young people student athletes in the Pac-12 are just incredible. Like the fact that I've gotten to know so many of them and hear their stories and realize the grind that they're sort of working through. I think back to my days in college, I'm like, what the hell was I doing? I couldn't even make it to like 3 classes a day. That felt like a lot. And, here these young people are like truly getting ready to change the world. And it's being able to sit down with them and getting to know them on a personal level has really been the biggest impact for me. I mean, a couple that just immediately come to mind, like Thomas Booker, who plays football at Stanford. I've had some really amazing conversations with him, both on camera and off camera. There's a couple of UCLA women's basketball players that I became close with over the summer, and we, collaborated on a few things, and I got to be a fly on the wall for one of their projects. Bruin Table Talk, by the way, go check it out. Just Google it and listen to some of those conversations because it's absolutely amazing. Matisse Thybulle, who's now with the Sixers, he played basketball at Washington and had an unbelievable, really sad story about his mom, who he was incredibly close with, passed away his senior year of high school, and how that shaped who he is, and how that became, sort of a driving force, and how she inspires him. And I got to sit down with him and have a really raw conversation about that. And it's those moments that you are just connecting with someone on a personal, meaningful level and sharing stories that you forget all these lights and cameras and microphones are around. When I think back about like what I'm going to feel the most grateful for in this career, it's those moments. It's not, interviewing Magic Johnson in Vegas at the Pac-12 tournament was unbelievable. Like getting to talk to Nick Foles at an Arizona game, like awesome. But the moments that really matter are those, not even necessarily the ones that take place on camera, where you just get to really know somebody and feel like you connect with them and hear a story that you would never have gotten to connect with all of these people. I think about all the amazing people I've gotten to meet, and it's all because of this career. That to me is why this career is the best. It's not because you've got, a blue check mark next to your name on Twitter, or because you can, say that you get to be on TV. Like that's the best part of this job by far, are the amazing people that you get to meet along the way. And that's why, again, like I just think about how thankful I am for those relationships. That's the thing that I think about the most, for sure.
I have to imagine that it's very inspiring. You see these young student athletes that are pursuing their dreams, and so many of them have had to overcome so many challenges to get to that point, and to be a part of their story and their journey. Even I've seen a couple of your interviews, and you did one a few years ago with Robert Paler, and I would let you talk about him if you'd like to. But I mean, he has suffered this catastrophic injury, and how he's reshaped his life. Just being a part of those moments, I have to think is really touching.
And this is why I wish I could, I need to make a list, because I can't believe I left Robert Paler out of that initial, he is someone who there's just people that you meet that change how you look at the world. And we interviewed him not too long after he had his catastrophic spinal cord injury, and he was rehabbing in Denver. And we went out there and shot the interview with him and his dad. And that story is unbelievable. I mean, obviously he was playing in the national championship game. He's a Cal rugby player. There was a guy from the other team that basically had him in a headlock and drove him into the ground, which is illegal. And it broke his neck. And he has every day since just defied the odds of what people thought was possible. I mean, they were thankful that he lived, to be quite frank. And we had a really unbelievable conversation. I remember just sitting there, like I had full tears which is not supposed to be, it's like the professional interviewer. You're supposed to be able to create those moments for them to open up and show emotion. But I was so overwhelmed by, I remember I asked him one time point blank, I said, do you forgive the player? If the player was, this is a question I said, if the player who essentially broke your neck was here, what would you say to him? Because he's never talked to him. The player never reached out. And he said, I would tell him that I forgive him. I would tell him that I forgive him with my whole heart. And that I don't think he wanted to break my neck. I think I would just want to ask him why he never reached out and why we were ever unable to connect. And it was just, he went into this unbelievable. And I'm like, God, this guy's 20 years old. He had his life sort of stolen from him. And yet he has just had this unbelievable positive attitude. He's now a motivational speaker. He graduated from the High School of Business at Cal. He, has a beautiful girlfriend, is living this life that is, and it's hard. I'm not going to say that his life isn't hard. He's trying to walk again, and he's taken a few steps, and he is working every single day. And I know there's nothing that I will put past what he can accomplish, but I'm so glad you brought him up, because that is another just unbelievable example of, in your mind how lucky you are with certain things in your life, but you just start taking things for granted. That's just human nature, right? You start thinking about the things that you wish that you had. And the beauty of this career is that you get to talk to all of these people who have had really tragic, hard things that they are dealing with, and you're watching them deal with them. And it really is an unbelievable perspective that is just right in your face that we all need. One other example I will give you of someone who impacted me is when I was in Syracuse, there was a little boy who was adopted by the team through this unbelievable organization called Friends of Jacqueline. And it pairs pediatric, brain tumor patients with college teams, and college teams kind of adopt these kids. And I remember meeting this little boy and his mom, and he was part of the Syracuse basketball team. And, we did a whole sit down with him and the team and what he brings to, and he would go to practice all the time. And I haven't followed up to see what ended up happening with him, but I think about him and his mom all the time. And it's just one of those, moments in your career that you get to be connected with somebody who just changes how you see things and gives you a perspective and reinvigorates any of the lost gratitude that you might have let escape from, just being on the hamster wheel of life. So not to get too deep into all of that, but I think it's the relationships and it's the perspective that you get to have, because you get to meet so many people who have been through, both unbelievable and unbelievably sad things.
And I think that's one of the incredible things about sports, period, is what else in our culture even provides that sense of community and allows people to share their stories in that way. We get these incredible examples of people who have overcome so much and then get to see them live out their dreams. And I think that's a really incredible thing about sports in general. But then speaking about this more inspirational aspect of sports, one of the last things I wanted to ask you about is, from my limited exposure to all the things that you do, it does seem like you spend an incredible amount of time giving back. You seem to really care about the people that you work with and people in the industry and helping where you can. And I would kind of love to know where that inspiration for you came from. And I've heard you speak a lot too about your family and particularly your grandmother, and that was one of the big influences in your life. So if you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think, and I've said this before, but I really mean it. My grandmother, she passed away last August at the age of 91, and she had this incredible life, a hard life a lot of the time, but the last 2 years of her life, we convinced her to move out to San Francisco. So she had been in Denver, and at the age of 89, she started a new chapter and moved out to San Francisco so that she could be close to my brother and I. And then my dad, her son, was down in San Diego, so he was able to see her a lot more. And it was such a gift. We didn't know how long we were going to have her out here, but we got her for 2 years. And she got to see my daughter born. She got to really know my son. She was here for every family event and all the kids stuff. And it just was really meaningful. And after she passed away, it was devastating. And at the same time, it was just like selfishly devastating. She was ready. She was good to go. But I was going through all of her stuff. We were, doing what you do after someone passes away, which is looking through all their possessions and trying to figure out, okay, this goes here and this goes there. And what are we giving away? And the thing that just struck me so much, and maybe it was a God wink, or maybe even more direct than that, like a God nudge, but it happened right when all of the layoffs happened at Pac-12. It was not, she passed away not long after that second round of layoffs happened. And I remember looking through all of her, I was finding all of these letters, some love letters from my grandpa who served in the war. I was finding just all these different things. And what just struck me so much as I'm going through pictures and notes and all of these and just loving reading all of them was that, and also overwhelmed by the number of people who reached out to us, is that there was this woman who never had like a career, right? She never had some big job. She never had anything to offer anyone other than her friendship and this joy that she sort of carried through life. And she had a great sense of humor and was just really a delight to be around and was super caring, made the best pancakes in the whole world. And that to me is always something I've talked to my brother about this a lot too. It was just, it struck me so intensely. Like you don't need to, you talk about resume accomplishments and what is your Wikipedia page going to say at the end of your career, at the end of your life? And you can talk about awards, you can talk about jobs that you've had, about events that you've covered, about things that you've achieved. But the reality is, and it became so clear in that moment, is that it is all about the relationships. And you sort of know that, but it was so clear to me in that moment that like the thing that is going to matter at the end is how you impacted people. And what did you do, and what kind of teammate were you? What kind of person were you to work with? What kind of mom were you? What kind of daughter and sister were you? And not to say that I'm good at all of those things all the time, but when you reshape your focus to be that that's the thing, and not, I need to go get the next better, more high profile, more high paying job, it makes you dial back and realize like your career is part of it, but your career is just a vehicle to help other people. I mean, that's what it should be to me. And yeah, it's awesome that you get to do cool stuff along the way. But if I don't open the door wider for someone behind me, if I don't help lift other women and other young aspiring people to have this job and make it better for them and make the industry better for them, or pass along some wisdom that I picked up along the way, then what's the point of it all? Like, is it just totally self-serving that you get to go to these cool sporting events? Like, who freaking cares? So it was a really poignant thing to have her pass away at exactly that time in my life, where it was just a reminder that like, you are not defined by your profession. And it's hard because it's what I've done my, whole professional career. But at some point that's going to end. And then what are you going to be left with? And so I think that it was just I appreciate you asking that question, because she had such a huge influence on me, continues to have an influence on me to this day. And I just think about all of the people that loved her so much when she didn't have status, she didn't have money, she didn't have anything other than just who she was and like the beautiful soul that she was, to offer people. So I try and think about that as much as I can.
I think it's so beautiful the way you speak about her. And even in my short-lived relationship with you, I have to say, I think that you're honoring her memory very well. It's really lovely that you feel so deeply about that and that you were able to have those memories with her. And ironically, I had a very similar experience with my great uncle, my grandfather's brother. He had never married and had kids, so he was like a grandfather to us. And when he passed away, very similar thing. We had no idea all the relationships that he had with other people. We knew he was so kind and generous and he was so important to us, but we had taken him and my grandparents to PF Chang's once when we were younger. And, children of Greek immigrants, PF Chang's, what are you doing? Taking me to a Chinese restaurant. Well, they all became obsessed with it. He loved it so much. He would buy gift cards and send them to people. And we had no clue. And when we were cleaning out his house afterwards, we found PF Chang's had sent him complimentary gift cards because he was such a good customer. And when we were at the funeral, all of a sudden, everybody started having stories of Uncle Jack Georgiadis. He never forgot my birthday. He never forgot our anniversary. He always sent us. And it was just, we thought the world of him, but the same kind of thing that when he passed, we didn't know about all of his impact. Yeah, and that's something that stayed with us for a long time. So I think that you're really, just really honoring her memory so well. So I
appreciate you sharing that story about your uncle. And by the way, my grandmother was also a daughter of Greek immigrants and loved PF Chang. So maybe they're kindred spirits. Hopefully,
you have got to be kidding me. That is so funny. Yeah. I can't believe that. Yeah, they complained the whole car right there. They wanted nothing to do with it. Absolutely nothing to do with it. And then my grandfather, they loved it so much. Every special event, they wanted to go there. He would take the chopsticks with him. There was a roll of chopsticks in the silverware drawer at the house. All in. So that's so funny. Oh my gosh.
It is. It's amazing the things that you learn. Yeah.
Yes. So the last thing I wanted to do is a new thing that I have. Did you ever watch Inside the Actors Studio?
You know what? A couple times, but not enough to say that I'm super well versed.
He had a list of closeout questions that he always did. So I had a couple closeout questions that I wanted to do. And it's really appropriate that you're the first person I'm doing this with, because you're, a professional journalist. So you can tell me if any of these questions are a dud and if I need to drop them from my list. But simple questions. Just give me your answer. Okay. Don't think about it too much, whatever comes to the top of your head. So the first question is, what makes you smile?
My kids and my family and my husband.
Good answer. What is your favorite word?
Oh, I love this question. I have thought about this more than I would like to admit in my life. Like, and I've had different points in my life where I had a favorite word.
Mhm.
Facetious is one of my favorite words because it has all of the vowels in order. And it's just kind of a beautiful word to
Oh,
say.
that's
Shout out to
impressive that
JB
you
Long,
know that.
my friend. Well, I was going to say it's the only reason I know that is I've had this. I asked JB Long, a very dear friend of mine, and a colleague of the Pac-12 Network, what his favorite word was one time, and that was what he gave me. And I was like, oh, that is a great word. So I've added that to my list. But I have. I'm gonna offline. I'm gonna send you an email of like my top 10 favorite words because I've got them. I love. It's a great question. It's a great
That's
question.
so funny. I can't wait to know
What's
what your
your
other
favorite
favorite
word?
words
Can
are.
I spin this around and ask you what your favorite word is?
You know what's so funny is I was really afraid, like, you better have answers for this sometime if somebody
Yeah,
wants to
that's
know. Um, I can tell you my favorite Greek word.
great.
My mom is very, very not Greek. She married my father, who is very, very Greek. So her Greek knowledge is like when it comes to language, but her favorite Greek word is kriokarpouzi because it's fun to say and it means cold, fresh melon.
Ooh, Creole
So that's my
Carpuzzi.
favorite.
That's good.
Yes, that's like a
Okay, I
fun
like that.
Greek
See,
word to
that's
say.
way better than facetious. I mean, that's
No,
yeah.
facetious is a good one.
Okay. All right. Well, you
Facetious
can
is a
have
good
that
one.
one. It's you can that can be yours if you need an
Okay,
English.
thanks. What is your favorite smell?
My initial just gut reaction was so weird. Like clean laundry. I love the smell of
Yes.
clean laundry.
Yes.
The other one I would add to that is the ocean, like being at the ocean and ocean air, ocean salt water, like that. I'd say those two are my two favorite words. Okay, or two favorite smells. Can I add a third one? And this is kind of weird, but anyone who's had a child will know exactly what I'm talking about. The smell of a newborn baby. It sounds so weird, but it's
No,
like
it
the
doesn't.
sweetest, most unbelievable. And then they smell gross the rest of their lives. But like the first like 3 days, just oh my gosh, just that little newborn smell. It's my girlfriend told me it was going to be a thing, and I had my first kid, and I'm like, oh yeah, all right, that's one thing that they have to offer. Other than that, they're just yelling at you.
No, those are all, I think those are all
Yeah,
great answers.
I know this is rapid fire, and I'm really screwing you up. So I
No, are you
apologize. I'll
kidding me?
try.
It's not like I care. You said when we had emailed, you were like, I can't imagine anybody wants to talk to me to that long.
Yeah,
I want to talk to you that long. Me. Uh, Especially when you give like laundry, people think I'm so weird. Anything that's like that smell is totally at the top of my
it's
list.
clean.
Yes.
Clean.
Yes.
Mhm.
What song always fires you up?
Mm. I mean, there's a lot of different ways I could go with this. I think I love Whitney Houston and I love Tina Turner, which again ages me and dates me to no end. But I think like when Simply the Best comes on, how can you be in a bad mood when that song is playing, right? Like
Yeah,
how, or I Want to Dance with Somebody, Whitney Houston. Those are my top
those are
two.
fantastic answers.
Yeah, they're
Mhm.
phenomenal songs, like that just make you feel like you
Yeah.
want to, have a drink or dance or turn the
Yeah.
volume up. Yeah. Those are,
No.
can I ask yours?
Uh, All Star Smash Mouth is my
Oh, okay. Nice.
jam
That's kind of a little
all the
bit of a
time.
throwback too. I like it.
And Get Back by Ludacris. That was like, that's
Oh
a
yeah.
little raunchy, but that was like, I
Yeah.
can't like not feel motivated.
Early 2000s hip hop is the best music going. Like if you, I mean, even the song that I love more than anything is Return of the Mac. Like you put that song on and you're in a good headspace. Like just try it. Next time you're kind of feeling not sure
Okay.
about, just start your day with that
So
song.
listen to it every day, basically, is what I should be doing
Pretty
right
much.
now.
Yeah. Mark Lawson, check it out. It's the best.
Okay. The next one I had was, what is something everyone loves, but you hate?
What is something everyone loves that I hate?
I have a lot of answers to this. Maybe that's a
Yeah.
bad
Okay. Can
sign.
you go
TV show. I have a couple TV shows that I wasn't a fan of. I was
okay.
never a big Office person, which is like not something you want to say in public, but
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate that honesty though.
do you?
I guess maybe I could also say that because I've watched it some, but I never fully got into it. And so maybe, yeah, I agree with that. Um, Pineapple on pizza. I feel like not everyone loves that, but that's kind of a controversial thing.
Yeah.
I do not like pineapple on pizza, and I feel like everyone I know
Okay.
loves pineapple on pizza, and that's just not a thing that I like. But yeah, I don't. Okay, what's another one for you?
Uh, I'm not a big spaghetti person. I don't know why. I'll eat other
Oh,
pastas, and this is true reporter style, by the way. It's very clear to tell what you do for a living that you keep flipping this back on me. But yeah,
yeah.
I'm not
Well,
a big
I'm
spaghetti
curious.
person. Yeah.
Spaghetti, man, I love spaghetti. Okay, but
I,
that's fair. That's
yeah,
cool.
I don't
But
know
it's
why.
interesting that you like pasta but not necessarily
I
spaghetti.
would
All right.
pick other forms of pasta before
Yeah,
spaghetti.
fair.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't
Okay.
know.
Okay.
What is the most rebellious thing you did as a teenager?
Oh my God.
Oh,
I mean, I gave my parents such a hard time my
I am
teenage years.
shocked that this is your demeanor right now. I would have thought for sure you would have like some lame answer.
No, I was kind of I was like I got good grades and I played sports and I was a good kid sort of on paper, but I pushed every single envelope that you could push. Like I snuck out of my house. I just did all the things. I mean, I guess the most embarrassing answer that I can give you, and I don't can't believe that I'm going to say this on a podcast, but in I think it was the summer between my 8th grade and 9th grade, so I was 13. We had this like weird idea, just like where your brain just goes away. We decided that we were going to wrap ourselves in cellophane and run around the neighborhood and like ding dong ditch people. Like, why? What is fun about that? You're just like trying to, was it like the adrenaline rush? I have no idea, but we would do the stupid stuff teenagers do. Like we would TP people, we would all of just that stupid stuff that I'm like, I remember my mom told me one time, she said, I hope you have a child exactly like you so you know what it's like. And I was
Ooh,
like, yeah, because she'd be awesome and we'll hang out and drink wine together and that'll be great. And then I think she got her wish because my daughter, she's only 2 and she is just,
oh no.
she's going to bring it. So yeah, I think my mom got her wish. I think I'm
You know
not
what?
looking forward to those teenage years.
If she's TPing houses though, that's kind of like PG
Yeah.
rebellion.
Yeah.
I would
I
maybe
guess
take the
so.
TPing the house. I would maybe
Yeah.
like hope that
As
that's
that's kind of the
yeah.
ceiling.
Yes.
Yeah. I'd say
Yeah.
that wasn't quite my ceiling, but yeah, let's stick with that. I hope she never
For
listens to this.
public consumption, we'll just go
Cora,
with
if you're
the
listening to this podcast, turn it off and go to bed.
all right. Next question. What is one of your guilty pleasures?
um, Guilty pleasure. I mean, I feel like before I was a mom, I could have answered these questions a lot better. Like a guilty pleasure now is just to sit on the couch and like watch TV. And I never stop. I feel like I'm always, especially when I'm home during, the weekends or the days that I'm off, the list of things that I need to do is so long that I'm just like, I just can't sit down and just chill out. And so when I'm able to like sit back and relax and binge watch a show, it's been a little while, but I think that is to me, and I'm always like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this. I shouldn't be doing this, but like, or watching a movie in the middle of the day. I haven't done that in a long
Ooh,
time, but that to me is like such a, like, just shut all the blinds and just put on a movie in the middle of the day when you're supposed to be outside doing something, getting exercise, checking off your to-do list. But like, that's a great guilty pleasure, which
that's a
God, that
good
makes me
one.
sound so lame. It needs to be better than
No,
that.
no, I think
Yeah.
that's a good one. Pancakes or waffles?
Pancakes.
You had see, there you go. You had a strong
Yeah.
answer on that one.
That
So
one, that
breakfast
one is good.
foods.
I love waffles with pancakes all the
Okay.
way.
Last two questions. What are 3 things you must do every day?
Um, I mean, that I feel like I am at the best version of myself when I do would be work out. I try really hard to play with my kids, and by play with my kids, like get down on their level, sit on the floor, build something with them, even if it's for 5 minutes, because it's really easy, even when you're home, to not do that, because there's always a lunch to be made or dinner to figure out or laundry to do or whatever, all those other things. So I try really hard to play with my kids, even if it's for a short amount of time, just concentrated with them. And the last would be make my bed. I'm a big believer that like life is better when your bed is made more of the time. I don't know if my husband agrees with me on that, but bed making is kind of a critical component. Like I know if I come home and my bed's not made, I'm like, man, I'm having a day. These are
Oh,
all so lame.
well, I was gonna say, if that's your definition of like being behind in life, I'd say you're probably doing okay. If you didn't get your bed made, you're probably doing fine.
Just even if
Uh,
everything else is kind of a disaster, if your bed looks nice, it's like, okay. you know,
I can
stuff
appreciate
everywhere
that.
else. Yeah.
I can appreciate that. Last question. What is a profession other than yours you would like to attempt?
Oh, that is the $1 million question. I mean, it's two different things. Like one is if I was going to go way outside the box, like the easy answer would be that I've always wanted to, like, what would it look like to be full-time producer sort of on the content decision side? And
Mhm.
I've, as I mentioned earlier, like I've been able to kind of test the waters more on that this last year, which I've loved. But if I was going to do something totally different, I'd love to do something that involved like traveling to other countries and meeting people. So maybe that's working for a travel magazine or, going to start, maybe it's like I don't know, some sort of school, like let's move to Europe or Bali or anywhere that is different than here for at least a few years. That's a big thing on my bucket list is to go live in another country when our kids aren't in high school yet. So I'm trying to work that out with my husband. But I think that being around different cultures and different people and getting out of your comfort zone is like one of the best things that you can do. And it's one of the best things you can do for your kids. So I'd say I'd pick something that took me out of the country, whatever that may be.
Cool. Well, you were the first participant in my list of 10 questions, and your answers were very insightful. I have to say, these were
great questions. I've done a lot of rapid fire questions, and those were all, I mean, yeah, those were all great. Did you come up with
I'm really glad. Yeah. I mean, I did a lot of Googling. Like some of them are like from Ellen. I think one's from Oprah. There was a lot of research that went into the 10.
Curated list though. I wouldn't lose any of those. Those are all good.
Good. Ooh, see if it's got the Ashley Adamson stamp of approval, then it's
for whatever that's worth. It's got it.
I'm ready. Oh, I told you, I think it's worth a lot, which is why I just can't thank you enough. I truly think the world of you. So thank you for taking the time to come and do this and hop on here and have a conversation with me. It's so great to hear about your experiences and hear some of your insight into the industry. So thank you for wanting to take the time to do this.
You are so welcome. It was totally my pleasure. And you're awesome. This was a delightful conversation. And I'm so glad that you reached out.
Yes, me too. Thank you, Ashley. I'll talk to you again. Thanks. Bye. Thanks again for listening to this episode of In the Game with Elliot. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Also, check out In the Game with Elliot on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, or watch full episodes on the YouTube channel.